Thank you, colleagues. The next item of business is a statement by Shona Robertson on the Scottish Government's medium-term financial strategy and fiscal sustainability delivery plan. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of her statement, and so there should be no interventions or interruptions. I call on the Cabinet Secretary up to 10 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Today I am publishing two documents that set out broadly how public finances will be managed over the next 5 years. The Scottish Government's 7th medium-term financial strategy and our first fiscal sustainability delivery plan. The Scottish Fiscal Commission are also today publishing an update to their independent forecasts which underpin the strategy and the plan, and I wish to thank Professor Graham Roy and the whole Scottish Fiscal Commission for their flexibility in working with us. Presiding Officer, with the world facing profound economic uncertainty, this MTFS is being presented in deeply challenging circumstances. Those challenges have been exacerbated by the actions of the UK Government, whose decisions continue to have serious consequences for the delivery of our public services. For example, the Chancellor has again failed to provide full funding for the additional costs of employer national insurance contributions, leaving public services in Scotland facing a £400 million shortfall. Further, in the UK spending review, had the resource funding been provided to the Scottish Government for day-to-day priorities matched the average increase for UK departments, we would have £1.1 billion more to spend over the next 3 years. And last week, they set out proposals that will deliver deep cuts to disabled people's support, pushing more people into poverty, with a real-life negative funding impact in Scotland of £440 million by 2029-30, based on the Office for Budget Responsibilities estimates. Now, it remains to be seen exactly how the UK Government will deliver its intended changes, seeing how this is a developing situation in Westminster today. But for the purposes of today's publications, I'm using the numbers given to us by the Treasury at the UK Spring Statement. For Scotland, funding from the UK Government for day-to-day spending is only expected to grow by 0.8% in real terms over the next 3 years, compared with 1.2% average growth for UK Government departments. And Scotland's capital block grant will be 1.1% lower in real terms by the end of the UK spending review period. Now, these allocations simply do not reflect the unavoidable realities of the demands that will be placed on public services by the demographic challenges that we face, not least through an ageing population. On capital, construction price inflation that has been turbocharged by Brexit continues to drive up prices, while the necessity to maintain and invest in new assets remains. To ensure that public services are there to meet the needs of the people, we are bringing forward our reform and savings plans. The UK Government is also taking similar action. The Chancellor has set out the approach to achieving fiscal sustainability for the UK, with all departments to deliver at least 5% savings and efficiencies by 2028-29. Within this, there are reductions in administration budgets of at least 11% in real terms by 2028-29 and 16% in real terms by 2029-30. We require to take similar actions, as without doing so, the forecast gap between funding and spending in Scotland could reach £2.6 billion for resource and £2.1 billion for capital by the financial year 2029-30. Managing the impact of Westminster austerity is all too familiar, and in spite of this, we continue to invest in the people of Scotland, supporting a better paid public sector, delivering high-quality public services and providing welfare support that is not available in other parts of the UK. And we have done this whilst delivering a balanced budget every single year since 2007. So we will reform and reshape our public services using technology to embrace and drive forward new ways of working. This shift is critical to our approach and underpins the first pillar of our strategic approach. First, we will continue to increase value for the public purse, maximising the amount of impact we achieve for our investment. And that's why, alongside the budget in December, I'll publish a multi-year Scottish spending review and infrastructure pipeline to set out affordable and sustainable investment plans for the years ahead. A framework for the spending review is being published in the MTFS today. Second, we will deliver efficiencies, improving productivity and making the most out of every pound of public money spent on delivery. We will focus on business improvement to drive down the cost of service delivery, not only in corporate functions as set out by the Minister for Public Finance last week, but across the whole system while protecting outcomes. This includes sharing services and estates across our public bodies and driving efficiencies from collaborative procurement across the public sector. And we will set a public sector workforce managed reduction target to reduce staffing levels by an average of 0.5% per year until 2030. This will be achieved by reforming our public services as set out in the Public Service Reform Strategy and through natural attrition and recruitment controls. By taking this action, we will protect valuable frontline services and continue to offer a progressive pay policy which recognises that our public sector workforce is our most valuable asset. And will focus on how we process and deliver benefits with dignity, fairness and respect, whilst driving important efficiency savings, ensuring that people access the support that they are entitled to. And will continue our targeted programme of efficiency and productivity improvement within the NHS. We will seize opportunities presented by the rise of innovation, digital and treatment advances, making a commitment to work with NHS boards and staff, ensuring the use of core resource is optimised and best value secured across NHS Scotland. Third, we will drive forward a service reform, improving the way we deliver services. We have got to integrate, support and empower the front line to bring together all the resources people and families need to thrive. And finally, we will focus on prevention, investing in the most impactful preventative spend to reduce demand on services in the medium to long term. We will deliver the technical and cultural change needed to go further to tackle the root causes of poor outcomes to improve lives. For example, through Best Upright Futures Breakfast Club delivering plan, we will continue to drive forward cross-government action on eradicating child poverty. And through the actions presented in today's delivery plan to maximise value from public spending and drive forward efficiency and reform, we expect to generate total cashable savings of £2.6 billion by 2029-30. This equates to 4.4% of the forecast resource budget in that year. Presiding Officer, growing the economy is a top priority for this government. And by boosting business activity, driving wage growth and creating employment opportunities for more people, we can broaden the tax base, alleviate pressure on the public finances and generate income tax revenue to support fiscal sustainability in the medium to long term. This is the focus for the second pillar of our strategy. Our plan for increasing Scotland's economic activity centres on creating a dynamic and flexible business environment, improving skills provision and supporting people to secure higher-paying jobs, creating the opportunity for people to enter or take on more or better work, attracting investment and promoting entrepreneurship in the industries of tomorrow. Yet the levers available to us to stimulate economic growth are, of course, limited. For example, the UK Government's current approach to immigration harms Scotland by failing to address our demographic and economic needs, exacerbating labour supply issues. Despite these constraints, this Government will continue to take action and make the most of Scotland's strengths and opportunities to boost our long-term economic prospects. Our overarching economic strategy sets out our vision for a fair, green and growing economy, and we are prioritising delivery of the actions outlined in the programme for government to deliver growth that will help people enjoy more prosperous lives now and for the long term and protect the public services that we rely on. The third pillar of our approach focuses on delivering a strategic approach to tax policy decisions. Presiding Officer, despite limited tax powers, we have taken bold and necessary action in recent years to ensure that our vital public services are prioritised. Our decisions on income tax since devolution helps protect investment in public services. Scottish income tax is forecast to raise a record £20.5 billion in 2025-26, with the latest SFC forecast showing a positive contribution to the 2025-26 Scottish budget of £616 million, and the total tax net position to be £2.3 billion by 2029-30. Our delivery plan sets out further the range of actions to improve the operation and performance of the existing tax system. For example, we are implementing new devolved taxes, including the UK Aggregates Levy in 2026 and the Building Safety Levy in 2027. And we are continuing to work in partnership with local government to ensure that local taxes are fair and sustainable. We will also take forward work on considering future reform to the tax system, including developing our thinking on longer-term issues such as wealth taxation. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, fiscal sustainability is about more than balancing the books. It's about delivering value, driving reform and making strategic choices that support long-term growth. By focusing on efficient public spending, modernising services, growing our economy and taking a strategic approach to tax, we can build a stronger, fairer Scotland. Meeting the challenges that face our public finances will require a collaborative effort across the public sector and beyond any single parliamentary year. This strategy and action plan sets out a clear path, and I invite my colleagues across the chamber to work with me to deliver it and ensure our public finances stay on a sustainable footing.
Thank you. The Cabinet Secretary will now take questions on the issues raised in her statement. I intend to allow around 20 minutes for questions, after which we'll move on to the next item of business. I'd be grateful if members who wish to put a question were to press their request to speak buttons now. And I call Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The last medium-term financial strategy was published just over 2 years ago. Last year's was binned and this year's was delayed, and by slipping this year's strategy out just before recess, we have no time to properly scrutinise this plan. But what we do know is that without radical action on public sector reform, on health and on labour force trends, Scots face substantially higher taxes or a state that does less. But the projected £5 billion fiscal gap by the end of the decade is not Westminster's fault or responsibility. It is the SNP's. Presiding Officer, today's 0.5% workforce reduction plan lacks ambition and detail. The tax strategy is wrong, bringing in just £616 million this year, £1 billion lower as a result of the SNP's economic performance gap. And there is simply still no credible plan to generate the growth needed to pay for it all. So I ask the Minister this: how can we trust the SNP to deliver additional tax receipts of £2.3 billion by 2029-2030, when their existing plans bring in only a quarter of that? How do Ministers intend to pay for Scotland's health outcomes, because yesterday's data revealed things are still getting worse? How does the Government intend to address alarming and rising levels of economic activity, which can no longer be ignored? And how will Ministers pay for the year-on-year surge in welfare spending, £2 billion as a result of SNP policy? Presiding Officer, isn't it the case that this delayed SNP document is too little, too late to rescue the Scottish economy or our fragile public finances?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, again, from Craig Hoy, we hear hyperbole rather than anything about the detail of the plans that I have produced today. And let me take Craig Hoy through a couple of facts. The first fact is, of course, that our funding is largely determined by Westminster, and I set out the impacts that are driving the gap in 29-30, three in particular. One, the cuts to disability benefits, which will impact the Scottish budget by £440 million. Of course, the cost of mitigating the UK Government's two-child cap could be offset if the UK Government decided to do that. The impact of employers' national insurance contributions with a gap of £400 million. And then, of course, we have the very, very low rate of funding growth of 0.8%, lower than the average of UK funding departments.
Let's hear one another.
It sounds to me like Craig Hoy wants to defend the Labour Government's spending review rather than defending Scotland's public finance and funding. That is a political decision for Craig Hoy to make. But let me explain, probably for the fourth or fifth time, a point that Craig Hoy seems to have misunderstood. The Scottish Fiscal Commission have produced an illustrative policy-only income tax net position. This is not not supposed to represent what income tax policy could raise for the Scottish budget. Time and time again, I have told him that, and more importantly, Professor Graham Roy of the Scottish Fiscal Commission has told Craig Hoy that. Perhaps he has to start listening a bit more rather than talking.
I call Michael Mara.
So today is the day when years of gross mismanagement of the public finances by SNP ministers caught up with them. Yes. And the price is being paid by ordinary Scots. Let's be crystal clear. By no definition other than the SNP's can the budget they receive be described as austerity. Scotland's budget will increase in real terms each and every year of this forecast. An additional £9.1 billion for Scottish public services. By 2930, the block grant will be £52 billion. And the reason this SNP government is making cuts is because they have spectacularly mismanaged Scotland's budget. It's SNP ministers who have created a structural deficit of a staggering £2.6 billion. That's a result of the choices that you made. The SNP cuts plans set out huge reductions in frontline workers and a 12% funding cut to Scotland's NHS boards. This comes at a time when only yesterday we learned of soaring A&E waiting times, the worst cancer waiting times on record. SNP ministers admitting that people are dying as a result of the incompetence. Domestic abuse statistics at a record highs and house building rates plummeting down. Cuts to mitigate their incompetence. It has never been clearer that Scotland needs a new direction. The SNP government have the powers, they have the money, but is it not right that they're out of ideas, they're out of excuses and they're out of time?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Michael Mara has outdone Craig Hoy's hyperbole as usual. So let me give Michael Mara some facts. Firstly, one fact is, of course, that the Chancellor is also delivering savings, 5% savings in efficiencies by 28-29, 11% reduction in administrative budgets in real terms by 28-29 and 16% in real terms by 29-30. Why is it that it's okay for Michael Mara's Labour UK government to make these reductions in corporate costs and back office costs, but it's it's not okay for the Scottish Government to make reductions in corporate costs and admin costs in order to protect frontline services? Michael Mara needs to explain why it's okay for the Labour UK government to do that, but it's not okay for this Scottish government to do that. We will take the action on reforms, on reduction in corporate costs, on reduction in back office and costs, in order to protect frontline services, in order to protect welfare spending, something Michael Mara and his colleagues wants to cut. So we'll protect the priorities of this government and we'll let Michael Mara defend a UK government record on disability cuts, which is indefensible.
Thank you. I would just say there's a lot of interest in this statement, and if we could all hear one another, we will be able to include more members. I call Paul McLennan to be followed by Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. East Lothian is one of the fastest growing areas in Scotland, along with the broader South East of Scotland region. Extensive economic and housing opportunities are possible within the region. This was highlighted in the Strategic Sites Programme October 2024, published by the Edinburgh and South East Scotland City Region team. Can I ask how the Scottish Government can engage with the local authorities in the area within the medium-term financial strategy to maximise opportunities?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Scotland's regional economies and regional economic partnerships are critical to growing our economy. The Strategic Sites Programme highlights that targeted government capital and revenue support can help unlock those strategic sites. That's why we're funding areas such as the Granton Waterfront with targeted funding to help unlock vital investment, and we'll continue discussions with strategic partners focusing on emerging business cases such as Blindwells over the next months to develop a joint approach to facilitate the progress of these strategic sites.
Murdo Fraser to be followed by Rona Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In May 2022, the then SNP Finance Secretary Kate Forbes, who I don't see in the chamber this afternoon, pledged the Scottish Government would reset the public sector, return the size of the workforce to pre-COVID levels and freeze the pay bill. We now know that all three of these promises were broken. The public sector pay bill has ballooned, while the civil service full-time equivalent headcount is up from 17,700 in 2019 to 27,400 now, a staggering 54% increase. At the rate of reduction of 0.5% a year announced today, how many years will it take to get back to pre-COVID levels as promised? I make it 70 years. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with my arithmetic?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, of course, what Murdo Fraser forgot to mention was the growth in areas over welfare spending that we now have devolved powers over, which required the establishment of Social Security Scotland. What I've set out today is an achievable and deliverable workforce reduction plan. It can be done in a way that focuses on back office and corporate costs. It will help and contribute a sizeable contribution to the overall cost reduction that I've set out in my statement, alongside the other work set out by Ivan McKee in his statement. What we will not do is we will not try to put forward propositions of unfunded, unaffordable £1 billion tax cuts that the Tories have absolutely no way of funding. And what we will also do is we will set out our spending review at the end of this year. It is up to the other parties in this chamber, presiding officer, whether it's the Tories or Labour, to set out their spending plans. The envelope is the envelope, and it will be very interesting to see whether they divert from our spending plans and, more importantly, what they will cut from those spending plans. So we will wait and see what they bring forward, presiding officer.
Thank you, and it would be very helpful if all front benches were always to set a very good example to the rest of the chamber. I call Rona Mackay to be followed by Daniel Johnson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The UK Government decision to cut disability benefits is completely wrong-headed. It's simply unacceptable to be trying to balance the books on the backs of some of the most vulnerable people in our society. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise what assessment has been made of the impact this will have on Scotland's public finances? And can she advise what steps the SNP Scottish Government will be taking to protect disabled people from these Westminster cuts?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the DWP's own impact assessment highlights that by 2029-30, 3.2 million families will lose out as a result of these reforms. 96% of those families include a disabled person. These changes will push a further 250,000 people, including 50,000 children, into poverty by 29-30. The UK Government disability benefit reforms will reduce the block grant adjustment funding we can expect to receive for social security benefits in 2029-30 by £440 million. This Government will not let disabled people down or cast them aside, and we will not cut Scotland's adult disability payment.
Daniel Johnson to be followed by Kenneth Gibson.
As already referenced, the Fiscal Sustainability Plan sets out that the devolved public sector workforce will fall by 0.5% in each year over the next 5. Now, given that the public sector workforce in Scotland is 469,000, I make that decrease will be 2,300 a year to a cumulative 11,700. Now, such stark action is perhaps unsurprising given the NHS headcount has increased just by 1/3 that of the NHS, and while police, fire, local government and colleges are all down over the last 5 years. So can the Cabinet Secretary confirm the figure of over 11,000 headcount FTE reduction? Will NHS and other frontline services be protected? And are these targets compatible with a no compulsory redundancy policy?
Cabinet Secretary.
So, Daniel Johnson asked some very important questions. So let me say, first of all, on health funding, the scale of the challenge in recent years and across the medium term will see a 3.3 real terms increase in spending for the health service, and that is important. But like the health service in England, they will require to be reform and efficiencies. In England, it's about £9 billion by 28-29. That's about 4.4%. In Scotland, we are requiring the health service to also reform, and particularly focused on the back office and corporate costs in order to protect frontline services. In terms of compulsory redundancy, what I have set out is, and I'm engaging with the unions and the STUC around this, is that no compulsory redundancy maintains to be the default position. But as a last resort, once all steps have been taken through voluntary severance, through redeployment, if there is no other route and there are no jobs for those people involved, then the compulsory redundancy can be considered, but only at the end of that route. So we believe that these reductions can be made through natural attrition and voluntary severance, and it is only in that extreme position that that would be enabled, and we don't see that happening in very many cases.
Kenneth Gibson, to be followed by Patrick Harvey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's disappointing that the UK Government's central capital allocation for Scotland in 4 years will be £163 million less than this year. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise what this will mean for capital investment in our infrastructure? And the statement mentioned a modest 0.5% annual decline in public sector workforce, as we have already heard. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise if this will be concentrated in specific departments or across the board, and how will frontline services be protected?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, on Kenny Gibson's last question, we absolutely are going to focus the reductions on back office and corporate costs. We believe that through reform we can make major changes to the way that back office and corporate functions are delivered to protect the front line. What we want to do is to be able to deliver our spending plans of the government's priorities of protecting frontline services, eradicating child poverty and growing the economy and net zero by taking the action that's set out in these plans. Kenny Gibson also mentioned capital. It's a very disappointing capital outlook in the spending review, and we will return to that through the spending review and the infrastructure investment pipeline that we'll set out at the end of the year alongside the 26-27 budget.
Patrick Harvey, to be followed by Jamie Green.
The envelope is not fixed. The Cabinet Secretary's own statement acknowledges that tax policy is going to have to play a role if we're going to avoid damaging cuts to public services. And the plan the Cabinet Secretary has published today commits to ensure that local taxes are fair and sustainable. Why then has the Government continued to oppose Green proposals to revalue council tax, the most substantial local tax that there is? And why is the work to replace this broken, outdated and deeply unfair tax seems to have stalled completely?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, we continue to discuss with COSLA through the joint working group potential reforms to local taxation, some of which, of course, have already happened with additional fiscal levers that local government now has. In terms of any substantial reforms to council tax, I've said at committee and I think in the chamber as well that it's important to build a political consensus around what that looks like. Otherwise, it's not going to get off first base, and that remains my position, not just with the parties in here, but with local government and, indeed, importantly, with the public as well.
Jamie Green, to be followed by Christine Graham.
Thank you. According to today's forecast, the Health, Social Care and Devolved Social Security Benefits Bill accounts for over half of all government spend, with both bills rising every year for the next 5 years to the tune of £150 billion. Now, the Scottish Government claims that economic growth is its top priority, but with 1 in 5 Scots economically inactive, surely the sort of public sector reform we need will actually help get people back into work, reduce the welfare bill and make our nation wealthier, healthier and happier. Does the Cabinet Secretary not accept that these forecasts out today instead demonstrate an unsustainable budget which actually achieves none of that?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, let me start by a point of agreement. It is important to get people back to work, and through our employability schemes and investment in employability, that is an important way of doing so. And of course, the focus we have on growing the economy with the investment in the Scottish National Investment Bank, the investment that we've taken through Scottish Enterprise and the delivery through our enterprise agencies, and of course we have incredible levels of direct investment into Scotland. There are some real underlying strengths of the Scottish economy. Is there more to do? Yes, there is more to do, and we look forward to working with Jamie Green and his colleagues around some of the additional measures that we can take, particularly around employability and what works to get people back into the labour market.
Christine Graham, to be followed by Liz Smith.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. As the pressure of labour austerity and inflation continues to attack the funding for our public services, and that increase in employers' national insurance continues to bite, More and more will probably fall to be delivered by the third sector, by our charities, yet they too fall foul of that National Insurance Employers' hike. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that charities should be exempt from this job tax, and if not, it should be fully funded?
Cabinet Secretary.
I do agree with Christine Graham on that point. I think the analysis was it was going to cost the third sector over £80 million, and that, of course, is going to be a cost to the services that they provide. We will work with the third sector in the absence of UK Government movement on exempting them to look at, for example, multi-year funding, because giving them certainty of funding is something I know the third sector would welcome very much indeed.
Liz Smith, to be followed by Michelle Thompson.
In the letter that the convener of the Finance Committee wrote to the Cabinet Secretary on the 14th of May, it was made abundantly clear that the committee had very significant concerns about the very late publication of the MTFS in the last week of term, which delays the scrutiny process for 2 months. Does the Cabinet Secretary recognise the serious implications of this late publication, the effects on scrutiny, on forecasting and on policy making?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, of course, I did so in my letter to the Finance Committee, recognise that this was a less than ideal situation, but it was driven by the fact that we needed to see the numbers in the UK spending review. And it's as well we did wait to see the numbers in the spending review, because there's been a deterioration on the forecasts that we had made and the SFC had made compared to what the actuality of the UK spending review was. So that was the whole reason that I delayed. Better to have the accurate figures, I would have thought, as the #1 priority.
And Michelle Thompson.
The Cabinet Secretary references culture change. The Permanent Secretary gave evidence to the Finance Committee yesterday and confirmed that nearly 50% of all Scottish Government staff are in a management role. This is a culture that must change as part of public sector reforms. So is the Cabinet Secretary absolutely assured of the complete support of the Permanent Secretary as accountable officer to make this quite skewed figure much more of a normal distribution?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the Permanent Secretary, of course, agreed that cultural change is required, and therefore, yes, I do believe that we have leadership within the organisation from the Permanent Secretary down to recognise that the spending plans and the outlook that I have set out today and the requirements for reform and doing things differently and headcount reduction has to be delivered through the organisation, starting at the highest level and the Permanent Secretary down. So absolutely, and he of course will be working very closely with the ministerial team and the First Minister in delivering that.
Thank you. That concludes the ministerial statement. There will be a short pause before the next item of business. My apologies to those members I was unable to reach.